The coffee cup exploded against the marble floor, a perfect echo of Sarah Mitchell's world-shattering. "Get your hands off my husband, you pathetic cow." The downtown Manhattan coffee shop went deathly silent, save for the espresso machine's gentle purr. Sarah was sprawled on the cold, unforgiving floor, her 6-month pregnant belly exposed beneath her cream-colored sweater. The overturned chair lay beside her, looking for all the world like evidence at a crime scene. Towering over her was a woman in impossibly high designer heels, her blonde hair styled to within an inch of its life, pure, unadulterated fury radiating from every pore of her 28-year-old face. "Victoria, enough!" Robert Mitchell's voice sliced through the shocked silence. But Sarah heard something else in his tone, something that chilled her to the bone. Not anger at his mistress, but the raw embarrassment of a man caught red-handed. Sarah struggled to push herself up, her movements clumsy and ungainly with the weight of the baby she'd never planned to carry at 48. The business crowd that frequented this upscale coffee spot was staring openly now, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Phones were already emerging from pockets and purses. She could practically hear the social media posts being composed in their heads. "Millionaire's wife attacked by mistress in broad daylight. Don't you dare tell me enough." Victoria Lawson snarled, her voice sharp enough to shatter glass. "I'm tired of pretending this cow matters. You promised me you'd handle this situation months ago." Handle this situation. Sarah finally managed to get to her feet, one hand instinctively and protectively cradling her belly. 22 years of marriage, reduced to a situation that needed handling. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" A young barista with kind eyes approached cautiously. "Should I call an ambulance?" Sarah looked at her husband of over 2 decades. Robert stood there in his $1,000 suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his face showing more concern for his precious reputation than for his pregnant wife who'd just been assaulted. At 52, he still turned heads, still commanded respect in boardrooms across the city, still made her feel like the luckiest woman alive, or he had until 3 months ago. "I'm fine," Sarah said quietly, though her hip throbbed where it had slammed against the floor. "Just clumsy, I suppose." Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Clumsy? Is that what we're calling it? You deliberately sat in that chair to cause a scene. Classic manipulation. Just like Bobby warned me about." "Bobby." Sarah's heart clenched. Nobody had called Robert Bobby since college. Nobody except her, in their most intimate moments. In the early years when he'd whispered promises about growing old together. "Victoria." Robert's voice carried a warning now, but it wasn't the kind a husband should use when defending his wife. This was the voice of a man worried about witnesses, about damage control, about stock prices in upcoming board meetings. "What?" Victoria's blue eyes blazed. "Everyone already knows. Robert, stop pretending this is some big secret. Half of Manhattan society knows you're leaving her for me." The coffee shop seemed to shrink around Sarah, the walls closing in on her. She became acutely aware of every stare, every whispered conversation, every phone camera pointed in her direction. These people would go home tonight and regale their families with the story of the pregnant woman who'd been publicly humiliated by her husband's mistress. They'd shake their heads in mock sympathy and wonder how any wife could let herself be so blind. But Sarah wasn't blind anymore. 3 months ago, when Dr. Jennifer Walsh had told her she was pregnant, Sarah had felt like the universe was giving her one last, unexpected gift. A surprise baby at 48, when she'd long thought her childbearing years were behind her. Robert's daughter, Emma, now 24 and living in Los Angeles, had been absolutely thrilled at the prospect of a baby sister or brother. "Mom," Emma had gushed during their video call. "This is like a miracle, baby. Dad must be over the moon." Sarah had thought so, too. At first, Robert had seemed shocked but pleased, even talking about cribs and college funds and how this baby would keep them young. He'd even joked about being a father again in his 50s, said it would give him something to brag about at the country club. Now she understood. Robert had never been happy about the baby. He'd been calculating. Mrs. Mitchell. The young barista was still hovering nearby, clearly uncomfortable with the explosive scene unfolding in her workplace. "Are you sure you don't need medical attention? You took quite a fall." "She's fine," Victoria snapped before Sarah could even respond. "She's just being dramatic. It's what she does." Sarah looked at this woman who claimed to know her so well. Victoria Lawson, 28 years old, MBA from Wharton, daddy's construction empire worth $30 million. Sarah had done her research in the weeks since she'd discovered the affair. Victoria was everything Sarah had been 25 years ago. Ambitious, beautiful, certain the world owed her everything she wanted. The key difference was that Sarah had earned Robert's love. Victoria was simply taking it. "Actually," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength now, "I think I do need to sit down. The baby," she said it deliberately, watching Robert's face. There it was, the flash of annoyance he tried and failed to hide. The baby was an inconvenience, a complication in his carefully orchestrated midlife transformation. Victoria's eyes narrowed with something that looked disturbingly like pure hatred. "Of course," the barista said quickly, gesturing toward a booth in the corner. "Please, let me help you." As Sarah made her way carefully across the coffee shop, she heard Victoria's voice behind her, lower now, but still perfectly audible. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Bobby. She's going to milk this pregnancy for everything it's worth. You need to file for divorce before she gets any bigger, before the courts start feeling sorry for her." Sarah sank into the booth, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone. She needed to call someone, anyone. But who? Her sister lived in California. Her parents had passed away years ago. Her closest friends were all part of the same social circle as Robert, the same crowd that would be dissecting this very scene over dinner parties for weeks to come. Rebecca Thompson, her college roommate, the one friend who'd never been impressed by Robert's money or status. Rebecca, who'd become a divorce attorney in Boston and spent her career helping women like Sarah rebuild their shattered lives. Sarah's fingers moved across her phone screen as the venomous conversation continued behind her. "You're being ridiculous," Robert was saying. "Sarah's my wife, the mother of my children. This isn't how civilized people handle these things." "Civilized?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and cruel. "There's nothing civilized about a middle-aged woman trapping a man with a pregnancy." She knew exactly what she was doing. Sarah's thumb hovered over Rebecca's number. Once she made this call, there would be no going back. No pretending this was just a rough patch. No hoping that Robert would come to his senses and remember the life they'd built together. But as she listened to her husband discuss their 22-year marriage like it was a business deal gone horribly wrong, Sarah realized there was nothing left to go back to. She pressed call. "Pregnant." Robert's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips, steam rising between them in their sun-drenched breakfast nook. At 48, Sarah had practiced this conversation in her head a dozen times during the agonizing drive home from Dr. Walsh's office. She'd imagined surprise, joy, genuine concern for her health, maybe even tears of happiness. She certainly hadn't expected the cold, careful calculation that flickered across her husband's face. "I know it's unexpected," Sarah said, settling into the chair across from him. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, their Westchester County estate stretched towards the distant horizon. 10 acres of perfectly manicured lawns and gardens that had taken her years of painstaking work to design. "Dr. Walsh says everything looks normal so far. The baby's due in January." Robert set down his cup with mathematical precision, the way he did everything. Even his morning routine was carefully choreographed. Coffee at 7:15, Wall Street Journal from 7:20 to 7:45. Departure for the city at exactly 8 a.m. "How is this possible?" he asked, his voice flat. "You're 48, Sarah. We haven't exactly been trying for children." There was something in his tone that made her chest tighten, a coldness that settled deep in her bones. Not the warm surprise she desperately hoped for, but something cooler, more distant, almost accusing. "Dr. Walsh says it happens more often than people think," Sarah said carefully, choosing her words with deliberate care. "My mother had my brother when she was 46, remember? That was different," Robert said, his gaze fixed on something beyond her. And with all the advances in prenatal care, Robert picked up his phone, scrolling through emails with the same focused attention he'd been giving her moments before. Your mother didn't have other priorities. Career considerations. Career considerations? Sarah felt her voice rise slightly, a tremor of disbelief creeping in. Robert, you're the CEO of your own company. You can make your own schedule. And I left my practice years ago to focus on Emma and the house. What career considerations? He looked up from his phone then, and for a fleeting moment she saw something she didn't recognize in his eyes. A shadow that disturbed her to her core. Something that looked almost like resentment. Things are complicated right now at Mitchell Holdings, he said finally, his voice tight. We're in the middle of a major acquisition. The board is breathing down my neck about quarterly projections. This isn't exactly the time for personal complications. Personal complications. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her still flat belly. Their child. A personal complication. I see, she said, keeping her voice level the way she'd learned to do during the difficult years when Robert was building his company, when stress made him sharp and distant. Well, the baby won't be here until January. That gives us 8 months to adjust. Robert's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with obvious relief. I have to take this, he said, already standing. It's Peterson from the Hong Kong office. He left the breakfast nook without so much as a goodbye kiss, already deep in conversation about market fluctuations and currency exchanges. Sarah sat alone among the remnants of their carefully orchestrated morning routine, watching a cardinal build its nest in the oak tree outside their window. She should have felt happy. They'd tried for years to give Emma a sibling before finally accepting that one child was enough. This baby was a gift, an unexpected blessing that would complete their family in a way she'd long since stopped dreaming about. Instead, she felt hollow, a vast emptiness spreading through her like a poison. Her phone rang, Emma's face filling the screen with her brilliant smile. Sarah's daughter had inherited Robert's dark hair and strong jawline, but her eyes were Sarah's, warm brown with flecks of gold. Mom, perfect timing. I was just thinking about you. Emma's voice carried the boundless energy of someone who'd finally found her place in the world. At 24, she was already making a name for herself as a documentary filmmaker in Los Angeles, fearlessly following stories that mattered to her with the same unwavering determination Robert brought to his high-stakes business deals. Hi, sweetheart. Sarah managed a smile that Emma couldn't see but might somehow hear in her voice. How's the new project coming? Incredible. We're following 3 women who started their own businesses after 50. Mom, you should see these women. They're warriors. One of them left her husband after 30 years and started a bakery with her divorce settlement. She's making more money now than she ever did as a housewife. Sarah's chest tightened. That sounds fascinating. It is. There's this whole movement of women reinventing themselves later in life. Society tells us we're invisible after 50, but these women are proving that wrong every single day. Emma paused. Mom, you sound weird. Everything okay? Sarah looked around the breakfast nook with its custom millwork and hand-painted tiles, its breathtaking view of grounds that cost more to maintain than most people's yearly salaries. This house had been her pet project for the last 10 years. Her canvas after Robert had told her she didn't need to work anymore. Actually, I have some news, Sarah said, steeling herself. I'm pregnant. The silence stretched on for so long that Sarah actually thought the call had dropped. Pregnant? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, are you serious? Very serious. Due in January. Oh my God. Sarah could hear Emma moving around, probably pacing her tiny Santa Monica apartment the way she always did when she was incredibly excited. Mom, this is incredible. A baby. Dad must be losing his mind with happiness. Sarah glanced toward Robert's study, where she could hear his voice rising and falling in the rhythmic cadences of a conference call. He's processing. Processing? Mom, you're having a baby. This is the best news ever. I'm going to be a big sister. Again. Oh my God. I have to come home. When can I come home? Emma's joy was infectious, And for the first time since Dr. Walsh had confirmed the pregnancy, Sarah felt a genuine smile spread across her face. "Whenever you want, sweetheart, you know you're always welcome. I'm booking a flight tonight. This is so exciting. Mom, a little brother or sister? Are you hoping for a boy or a girl?" "Healthy," Sarah said automatically. "Just healthy." But as she listened to Emma excitedly make plans for her visit, Sarah found herself inexplicably hoping for a daughter. Another Emma. Another bright spirit who could fill the quiet spaces that had grown increasingly silent in their vast house over the years. After they hung up, Sarah sat in the breakfast nook for a long time, simply listening to the familiar sounds of her opulent house. The grandfather clock in the foyer solemnly chiming the hour, the soft, almost imperceptible hum of the air conditioning system, the distant murmur of Robert's voice as he expertly solved other people's complex problems with his trademark efficiency. She should call her doctor, schedule the necessary appointments, start taking prenatal vitamins. She should diligently research the latest recommendations for pregnancy after 45, read up on all the potential risks and necessary precautions that would inevitably shape the next 8 months of her life. Instead, she found herself thinking about Emma's documentary, about the remarkable women who had somehow managed to reinvent themselves after 50. Sarah had been 26 when she'd married Robert, 30 when she'd given birth to Emma, 35 when she'd sold her burgeoning interior design practice to focus on being a full-time mother and devoted wife. Now she was 48 and unexpectedly pregnant, married to a millionaire husband who openly saw their child as a mere personal complication. At what precise point, she wondered with a sudden, sharp pang of clarity, had she stopped being Sarah Mitchell, the person, and slowly morphed into Sarah Mitchell, the accessory. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Robert. "Dinner with Peterson tonight. Don't wait up." Another business dinner. Another evening spent utterly alone in their 10,000 square foot house. Another long night spent wondering when, exactly, their marriage had devolved into a series of meticulously scheduled calendar appointments and strained, polite conversations. Sarah looked down at her still flat belly, where their child was growing despite the seemingly insurmountable odds, despite the inconvenient timing, despite Robert's obvious displeasure. "Well, little one," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "it looks like it's just you and me for now." The cardinal outside the window had finally finished its nest. A perfect circle of intricately woven twigs and soft moss nestled securely in the crook of the oak tree's strongest branch. Sarah watched as the bird settled into its new home, its wings carefully folding around the empty space where its precious eggs would soon rest. Maybe that was exactly what she needed to do. Build a strong, impenetrable nest of her own, strong enough to protect what truly mattered most to her, regardless of whether anyone else, including her own husband, truly understood the immeasurable value of what she was now so fiercely creating. Rebecca Thompson answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the crisp, efficient tone that had undeniably made her one of Boston's most sought-after and highly respected divorce attorneys. "Sarah, this is a surprise. How are you?" Sarah gripped her phone tighter, still sitting alone in the coffee shop booth, while the painfully humiliating drama of her very public marital implosion continued to play out behind her. Victoria's voice had dropped to a menacing hiss, but her venomous words were still perfectly audible to anyone who happened to be paying even a modicum of attention. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something," Sarah said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hypothetically?" "Oh, honey." Rebecca's tone shifted immediately from strictly professional to deeply personal. "How hypothetical are we talking here?" Sarah watched Robert pointedly check his expensive watch, probably calculating how long this sordid scene would take to resolve itself before he was forced to be late for his next all-important appointment. If a woman in New York discovered her husband was having an affair, what would her options be? Depends on a lot of factors. How long have they been married? Is there a prenuptial agreement in place? Are there children involved? What are the assets? 22 years. Yes, there's a prenup. One adult daughter. And Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly. Another child on the way. The silence on Rebecca's end now spoke volumes. "Sarah, please tell me this is actually hypothetical. I wish it were. Where are you right now?" Sarah looked around the increasingly crowded coffee shop, where the young barista was nervously wiping down tables with exaggerated motions while the other customers tried, and failed, to pretend they weren't openly staring. "A very public place," she said. "Having a very private conversation, exposed for everyone to see. Can you get somewhere safe? Somewhere we can talk properly? Safe?" Sarah almost laughed, the sound catching in her throat. "I don't even know what that means anymore, Rebecca. I thought I was safe in my marriage, safe in my house, safe in my life. I actually thought 22 years meant something." "It does mean something, honey. It means you have rights. It means you have options. But I need you to focus for me right now. Are you in any immediate physical danger?" Sarah glanced over at Victoria, who was now jabbing her finger aggressively at Robert's chest while he desperately tried to calm her down. "I don't think so," she said. "But his mistress just knocked me down in front of half of Manhattan, and I'm 6 months pregnant. Rebecca." "She what?" Rebecca's voice went absolutely arctic, the temperature dropping at least 50 degrees. "That's assault. Have you called the police yet?" "I called you first." "Okay. Listen to me very carefully. Document everything. Take pictures if you can do it safely. Get contact information from any potential witnesses. And yes, call the police. This isn't just about your marriage anymore, Sarah. This is about protecting yourself and protecting your baby." Sarah felt something fundamental shift deep inside her chest. A sudden, almost imperceptible hardening that she didn't immediately recognize. "What about the prenup?" "What kind of prenup? Basic asset protection or a full waiver?" "I honestly don't know. Robert's lawyers handled everything. I just signed where they told me to sign." The words sounded pathetic, even to her own ears. "I was so in love, Rebecca. I trusted him completely." "Okay. First rule. Stop beating yourself up for trusting your husband. Second rule. Prenups aren't automatically ironclad. There are ways to challenge them, especially if there was any coercion involved, or if circumstances have changed significantly since it was originally signed, like an unexpected pregnancy." "Like an unexpected pregnancy." "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't sign anything else. Don't agree to anything. Don't make any major financial decisions. And for God's sake, don't let him convince you that this is all just a huge misunderstanding that you can somehow work through." Behind her, Sarah heard Victoria's voice rise again, louder and more shrill than ever. "I'm not waiting another 6 months for you to grow a spine, Robert. Either you tell her tonight or I will." "You want me to file for divorce?" Sarah said, the unfamiliar words tasting oddly strange and metallic in her mouth. "I want you to protect yourself and to protect your children. There's a difference." Rebecca's voice softened, becoming almost tender. "Honey, I know this is all incredibly overwhelming. I know this isn't what you wanted, but sometimes life just forces our hand. And when that happens, we have to be smart." Sarah thought, not for the first time, about Emma's documentary, about the inspiring women who had boldly reinvented themselves after 50. Had any of them ever sat in a crowded coffee shop, forced to listen to their husband's mistress gleefully plan their utter destruction? "What would I need to do first?" "Get somewhere safe and call me back. We'll need to discuss overall strategy, meticulously gather all relevant documentation, and carefully figure out your complete financial picture. Do you currently have unfettered access to all of your bank statements, tax returns, and investment accounts?" "Some," Sarah admitted, suddenly realizing just how frighteningly little she actually knew about their vast and complex finances. Robert handled absolutely everything, generously giving her credit cards and a household account. He personally paid all the bills. She'd always thought it was merely generous. Now, she couldn't help but wonder if it had been deliberately strategic. "Good. We'll definitely need all of that. Also, I want you to immediately start documenting everything. Keep a detailed journal of dates, times, specific conversations. Record things if you can legally do so in the state of New York." "Rebecca." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper now, trembling with fear and uncertainty. "What if I'm making a huge mistake? What if this is just a midlife crisis and I'm destroying my entire marriage over something he might very well regret? Sarah, listen to me very carefully. Rebecca's tone was firm, but deeply kind. A midlife crisis is impulsively buying a bright red sports car or suddenly taking up skydiving. Having a long-term affair, and then standing idly by while your mistress assaults your 6 months pregnant wife in public? That's not a crisis, Sarah. That's a deliberate, conscious choice. The sheer, unvarnished truth of it hit Sarah like a physical blow, knocking the wind right out of her. Robert had made choices, probably dozens of them, over the course of the past several months. He'd consciously chosen to pursue Victoria, chosen to lie to Sarah, chosen to stand silently by while another woman publicly humiliated her. These weren't mere mistakes or fleeting moments of inexplicable weakness. They were cold, calculated, and utterly deliberate decisions. Ma'am. The young barista appeared hesitantly at her table, clearly anxious to somehow resolve this increasingly volatile situation. I'm really sorry to bother you again, but should I call the police? That woman pushed you pretty hard, and you're pregnant. Sarah looked at the young girl's genuinely concerned face, then down at her phone, where Rebecca was patiently waiting for an answer. Then she looked through the window at her husband, who was now calmly escorting Victoria toward the exit, all the while desperately trying to placate her with soothing words. Yes, Sarah said, her voice sounding surprisingly stronger and more resolute than she'd expected. Please call the police. As the harried barista hurried away to make the call, Sarah brought the phone back to her ear. Rebecca, I think I need more than just hypothetical advice. I need you. I'm proud of you, honey. This is definitely the hardest part. Finally making the difficult decision to fight for yourself. Everything else from here on out is just paperwork and overall strategy. I'm scared, Sarah admitted, her voice trembling. Good, Rebecca said. Smart people are scared when they're about to do something incredibly brave. But Sarah, you're absolutely not alone in this. You have me, you have Emma, and you have 22 years of marriage that legally entitle you to a hell of a lot more than Robert currently thinks you deserve. Through the coffee shop window, Sarah watched Robert help Victoria into a waiting town car. He briefly looked back at the shop once, his face completely unreadable, before finally getting in beside her. He didn't bother to look back again. Rebecca, Sarah said, her voice now firm and unwavering. How soon can you get to New York? I'll be on the very next train. As the distant wail of approaching sirens grew steadily louder, Sarah finally realized she was no longer the same woman who had confidently walked into this very coffee shop just an hour ago. That woman had been a trusting wife, a soon-to-be mother again, a woman who still blindly believed in the supposed permanence of solemn promises made over 2 decades ago. This woman, the one now sitting alone in the corner booth while police cars pulled up outside, was now something else entirely. This woman was ready to fight. 3 days after the infamous coffee shop incident, Sarah sat alone in the hushed, book-lined library of her sprawling Westchester mansion, surrounded by towering stacks of carefully labeled boxes overflowing with financial documents and feeling strangely like an archaeologist painstakingly excavating the long-buried and increasingly mysterious ruins of her own life. Rebecca had arrived from Boston that very evening, armed with nothing more than a legal pad, a digital recorder, and 2 decades of invaluable experience helping countless women successfully untangle the painfully complicated knots of their long and ultimately failed marriages. Start with the bank statements, Rebecca had said, settling comfortably into the worn leather chair across from Robert's imposing mahogany desk. We need to understand the full, complete financial picture before we even begin to make any strategic moves. Sarah opened the first folder, her hands now feeling noticeably steadier than they had been since Monday's deeply humiliating public debacle. The police report had officially been filed. Victoria Lawson was now formally facing multiple charges for assault, and Robert was conveniently staying at the luxurious Carlisle Hotel, allegedly while they worked things out. His precise phrase, carefully delivered with the very same detached tone he might casually use to discuss a minor scheduling conflict. Here's what I really don't understand, Sarah said, pulling out their joint checking account statements. We have quarterly financial meetings with Robert's trusted financial advisor. I diligently see these numbers every 3 months. How could I have possibly missed the glaring signs of an ongoing affair? Rebecca looked up from her overflowing legal pad, her expression thoughtful. Because you weren't exactly looking for any specific signs of an affair. You were mainly focused on investments in Emma's college fund and your own long-term retirement planning. Financial infidelity is completely different from regular infidelity, Sarah. And most affairs certainly don't show up on monthly bank statements. But this one obviously does, Sarah said, a hint of rising anger creeping into her voice. This one very well might. Victoria Lawson clearly has extremely expensive tastes. And your husband. She'd been noticing that he had been taking her on business trips. Start looking for charges you don't recognize. Restaurants you didn't eat at, hotels you didn't stay in. Sarah ran her finger down the columns of numbers. Her accountant's training from decades ago was slowly returning. There it was. A charge at Lerner Dan on a night when Robert had claimed he was in Chicago. Another at Cartier 2 weeks before her birthday, but she'd received no jewelry from Cartier. Rebecca, look at this. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands had started to shake again. $15,000 at Harry Winston. 3 days after I told him about the pregnancy. Rebecca leaned forward, studying the statement. What did you get for your birthday that year? Pearl earrings from Tiffany. Maybe $2,000 worth. So where's the other $13,000? They spent the next 2 hours building a timeline of financial irregularities. Business dinners on weekends when Robert claimed to be playing golf. Hotel charges in cities where his company had no clients. Flowers delivered to addresses Sarah didn't recognize. This is sophisticated financial infidelity, Rebecca said finally. He's been careful but not careful enough. These expenses are all business deductible, which means he's been using company money to fund his affair. Sarah's stomach turned. Is that illegal? It's certainly unethical, and it's grounds to challenge your prenup if we can prove a pattern of financial deception. The front door chimed, and Sarah heard Emma's voice in the foyer. Her daughter had flown in from Los Angeles the day after the coffee shop incident, arriving with suitcases and a fierce determination to support her mother through whatever came next. Mom! Emma appeared in the library doorway carrying a tray with coffee and sandwiches. I thought you might be hungry. Sarah felt a rush of gratitude for this brilliant, fierce young woman who'd inherited the best parts of both her parents. Emma, you remember Rebecca from college? Of course. Emma set down the tray and hugged Rebecca warmly. Thank you for coming. Mom needs someone in her corner who knows how to fight. Your mother is stronger than she realizes, Rebecca said. She just needs to remember that strength. Emma settled on the arm of Sarah's chair, her presence both comforting and energizing. I've been thinking about something, she said. The women in my documentary, half of them discovered their husbands' affairs the same way Mom did, through financial irregularities or public humiliation. There's a pattern to how men in their 50s handle midlife transformation. Sarah looked at her daughter with new appreciation. What kind of pattern? They convince themselves their wives are holding them back from some authentic version of themselves. Usually involves a younger woman who represents the life they think they should have had. Emma's voice carried the analytical tone she used in her films. The irony is that they're not transforming at all. They're just trading one set of responsibilities for another, one woman for another. That's remarkably insightful, Rebecca said. And it fits the legal pattern, too. Men who claim their marriages are stale or unfulfilling, but who fight viciously to keep the financial benefits of being married. Sarah thought about Robert's reaction to her pregnancy, his careful calculations and scheduling concerns. Had he already been planning his exit when she'd shared the news about their baby? There's something else. Emma said, I called my friend Jessica in Dad's PR department. She says Victoria's been at every company event for the past 6 months. Not as a guest or client, as Robert's date. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Company events meant board members, clients, partners. Robert had been parading his mistress in front of their professional community for months while Sarah stayed home, growing their child, and planning nursery decorations. He's been creating a narrative, Rebecca said grimly. establishing Victoria as his partner in professional settings, making your absence seem natural. This wasn't spontaneous, Sarah. This was strategic. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Can we have dinner tonight? Time to discuss our situation like adults. She showed the message to Rebecca, who frowned. Don't agree to anything face-to-face yet. We're not ready. What if he wants to reconcile? Do you want to reconcile? Emma asked gently. Sarah looked around the library where she'd spent countless evenings reading while Robert worked late, or claimed to work late. She thought about the coffee shop, about Victoria's hands on her husband, about Robert's expression when his mistress had called her pathetic. I don't know if I can trust him anymore, she said finally. And I don't know if I can respect a man who would let another woman assault his pregnant wife. Those are your answers, Rebecca said. Trust and respect aren't negotiable in a marriage. Sarah typed her response to Robert. I think we should communicate through lawyers from now on. His reply came immediately. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. We can work this out. She showed Rebecca the message and her friend's expression hardened. Classic manipulation. He creates the crisis, then blames you for being dramatic when you respond to it. We see this constantly. What do we do next? We file, Rebecca said simply. Tomorrow. I want to get ahead of whatever strategy he's developing. As evening fell over the mansion, Sarah found herself standing in the nursery she'd started decorating months ago. The walls were painted a soft yellow, gender-neutral and welcoming. A rocking chair sat in the corner, the same one where she'd nursed Emma 24 years ago. Emma joined her, slipping an arm around her mother's waist. Are you okay? I keep thinking about what you said about women reinventing themselves after 50. I never thought I'd be one of them. Mom, you're 48 and pregnant. You're about to become a single mother while fighting a millionaire ex-husband for a fair divorce settlement. If that's not reinvention, I don't know what is. Sarah felt a smile tug at her lips despite everything. When you put it that way, it sounds almost heroic. It is heroic, Emma said firmly. And Mom, you're not doing this alone. You have me, you have Rebecca, and you have a lot of people who love you. Dad may have forgotten your worth, but the rest of us haven't. That night, as Sarah lay in her empty, king-sized bed, she felt her baby move for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings, reminding her that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her child's future, for the right to raise this baby in a world where women didn't have to accept narcissistic abuse or financial manipulation. She was fighting for the woman she used to be and the woman she might become. The divorce papers were filed on a Friday morning in November, 2 weeks after the coffee shop incident that had changed everything. Sarah sat in Rebecca's temporary New York office, watching her friend review the final documents with the methodical precision that had made her legendary in family law. Adultery, financial malfeasance, and emotional abandonment, Rebecca said, checking off items on her legal pad. Plus, we're requesting full forensic accounting of all business and personal assets going back 5 years. Robert's going to fight this, Sarah said, one hand resting on her increasingly prominent belly. At 28 weeks, she could no longer hide her pregnancy behind loose sweaters and careful posing. Let him fight. We have documentation, witnesses, and a very sympathetic plaintiff who was assaulted by his mistress in public. Rebecca's smile was sharp. Plus, his girlfriend is facing criminal charges. Not exactly the image Mitchell Holdings wants in their annual report. Sarah's phone buzzed with yet another text from Robert. He'd been calling and messaging constantly since receiving the papers, his tone alternating between wounded husband and calculating businessman. He wants to meet, Sarah said, reading the latest message. Says he can explain everything if I'll just listen. Absolutely not. Not without me present, and not until we've completed discovery. Right now, any contact with him is a chance for him to manipulate or intimidate you. The office door opened, and Emma entered, carrying coffee and a grim expression. Mom, you need to see this. She handed Sarah her phone showing a page 6 article with the headline, Mitchell Holdings CEO's pregnant wife files for divorce amid assault scandal. Sarah's stomach dropped as she read the opening paragraph. Sources close to the family suggest the marriage has been troubled for years, with friends describing Sarah Mitchell as increasingly controlling and jealous as her husband's business success grew. Controlling and jealous. Sarah's voice rose. I haven't been controlling about anything in 20 years. It's a classic PR strategy, Emma said angrily. Dad's hired a crisis management firm. They're trying to control the narrative, make you look like the unstable one. Rebecca was already on her phone. This is exactly why we filed quickly. He's going to try to paint you as an opportunistic wife using pregnancy to extract money from a successful man. We need to get ahead of this. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's phone rang. Robert's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment she was tempted to answer. Part of her still wanted to hear him explain, to find some way back to the life she thought they shared. Don't, Rebecca said firmly. Anything he says now is either manipulation or evidence. Neither helps you. But the phone kept ringing, and finally Sarah answered. What do you want, Robert? Sarah, thank God. We need to talk. This divorce filing is insane. You're destroying our family over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Sarah's voice was ice. Your mistress assaulted me in public. Robert, you stood there and let it happen. What exactly did I misunderstand? Victoria was upset. She'd been drinking, and she misinterpreted some things I'd said about our marriage. But Sarah, she means nothing to me. You and the baby are my family. The words sounded rehearsed, probably crafted by the same PR firm that had labeled her controlling and jealous. If we mean so much to you, why are you telling Page 6 that I'm an unstable gold digger? The silence stretched long enough that Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. I didn't authorize that article, Robert said finally. But Sarah, you have to understand. This divorce filing makes me look like I'm abandoning my pregnant wife. My board is furious. Stock prices are affected. You're damaging my company. I'm damaging your company? Sarah felt her blood pressure rising, a dangerous thing in her condition. You're the one who paraded your mistress around business events for months. You're the one who let her attack me in front of witnesses. But somehow this is my fault? Sarah, please, let's meet somewhere private. Just us. We can work this out. No, Sarah said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. We can't work this out. Robert, you made that choice when you decided I was a personal complication that needed handling. She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking with adrenaline and fury. Good, Rebecca said firmly. He's going to escalate now. Probably try financial pressure. Are you prepared for that? What kind of financial pressure? Frozen credit cards, restricted access to accounts, sudden discoveries that marital assets aren't as substantial as they appeared. It's a common strategy. Make the wife financially desperate so she'll accept a quick, unfavorable settlement. Emma looked up from her phone where she'd been scrolling through social media responses to the Page 6 article. Mom, it's not all bad news. A lot of people are supporting you. There's actually a hashtag women supporting women, and it's trending. Sarah felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. Really? Wait, look at this. Emma showed her the screen. Women sharing their own stories about financial independence after narcissistic abuse, divorce settlements that changed their lives, midlife transformation. Your situation is resonating with a lot of people. Rebecca leaned over to see the phone. This is good for us legally, too. Public sympathy matters in high-profile divorces, especially when there are business interests involved. As afternoon turned to evening, Sarah found herself reading message after message from women who'd faced similar situations. Wives who'd discovered affairs through financial records. Mothers who'd been called controlling for expecting fidelity. Women who'd rebuilt their lives after decades of marriage ended in betrayal. Their stories gave her strength, but they also revealed a sobering pattern. The women who'd fared best in their divorces were the ones who'd fought from the beginning, who'd refused to be painted as victims or gold diggers. Rebecca, Sarah said finally, what's our next move? We go on offense, full forensic accounting, depositions from his business associates, subpoenas for his travel records and communications. If Robert wants to fight dirty, we'll show him what that really looks like. That night, alone in her mansion, Sarah stood in the nursery and talked to her unborn daughter. The ultrasound that week had confirmed what her heart had somehow known. She was carrying a little girl who would enter the world in the middle of what might be the biggest fight of Sarah's life. "Your daddy thinks I'm being dramatic," she whispered to her belly. "He thinks I should accept being replaced quietly, gracefully, like a good wife who knows her place. But you know what, little one? I don't think good wives accept being pushed down by their husbands' mistresses." The baby moved. A strong kick that made Sarah smile despite everything. "That's right," she said. "We're fighters, you and me, and we're going to show your daddy and everyone else what happens when you underestimate a woman who's got nothing left to lose and everything to protect." Outside, November wind rattled the windows of the house where she'd thought she'd grow old with Robert. But inside the nursery, planning for her daughter's arrival, Sarah Mitchell felt stronger than she had in years. The woman who'd been knocked down in that coffee shop was gone. The woman standing in her place was ready for war. December arrived with an early snowfall that blanketed the Westchester estate in pristine white, making the mansion look like something from a Christmas card. Sarah stood at her bedroom window, watching the grounds crew clear the circular driveway, and tried to ignore the fact that this might be her last Christmas in the house where she'd raised Emma. "Mom!" Emma's voice carried from the doorway. "Rebecca's here with news." Sarah turned from the window, her movements careful now that she was 32 weeks pregnant. The baby seemed to grow larger every day, pressing against her ribs and making sleep nearly impossible. But with each passing week, she felt more determined to see this fight through to the end. Rebecca was waiting in the library, her expression unreadable as she spread documents across the conference table they'd set up weeks ago. "We've got problems," she said without preamble. "And we've got opportunities." "Problems first," Sarah said, settling into her chair with Emma's help. "Robert's trying to claim that the baby isn't his." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Emma gasped audibly, and even Rebecca looked disgusted by what she just said. "What?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "His lawyers filed a motion yesterday requesting paternity testing. They're claiming that given the state of your marriage and the timing of the pregnancy, there's reasonable doubt about paternity." Sarah felt the world tilt around her. In all the scenarios she'd imagined, all the ways she'd thought Robert might fight, this hadn't occurred to her. "But that's insane. I haven't been with anyone else in 22 years. The only man I've so much as kissed is my husband." "I know that, and you know that, but it's a legal strategy," Rebecca said grimly. "If he can raise doubt about paternity, he can avoid child support obligations and paint you as an unfaithful wife seeking financial gain." Emma was pacing now, her filmmaker's mind clearly working through the implications. "This is character assassination. He's trying to destroy Mom's reputation so completely that no one will believe her version of events." "Exactly," Rebecca confirmed. "The scorched earth tactics. He's not trying to salvage the marriage or protect his family anymore. He's trying to win at all costs." Sarah pressed her hands to her belly, feeling her daughter's strong heartbeat beneath her ribs. The little girl who'd been conceived during one of the few intimate moments she and Robert had shared in recent months when he'd been tender and loving and had whispered about how beautiful she was, even at 48. "Can we fight this?" "We can and we will. But Sarah, I need you to understand what this means. He's going to make this uglier than anything you've imagined. If we proceed, your private life, your marriage, your sexual history, it's all going to be dissected in court." The room fell quiet except for the soft hum of the heating system and the distant sound of snow plows on the road. Sarah thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, planning a nursery and choosing paint colors, believing that her biggest challenge would be managing a pregnancy at 48. "What are the opportunities you mentioned?" she asked finally. Rebecca's expression shifted to something that might have been satisfaction. "This move was a mistake on his part. It's so obviously vindictive that it's going to backfire spectacularly. No judge is going to look at a wealthy man trying to deny paternity of his pregnant wife's child and see him as the victim. Plus," Emma added, her voice tight with anger, "I've been documenting everything for months now. I have footage of him talking about the baby, expressing excitement, making plans. If he wants to claim he doubted paternity, we can prove he was lying then or lying now. Sarah looked at her daughter with amazement. You've been filming this? I'm a documentary filmmaker, Mom. This is what I do. I document truth. And the truth is that Dad was over the moon about this baby until he decided you were inconvenient. Rebecca pulled out another folder. There's more. The forensic accounting came back, and it's even worse than we thought. He's been systematically moving assets offshore for over a year. This wasn't a spontaneous affair, Sarah. This was planned. How much? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. $15 million in the past 18 months, hidden in shell companies, offshore accounts, investments in his girlfriend's father's construction business. He's been preparing for this divorce since before you got pregnant. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that Sarah felt almost detached from it. This wasn't the Robert she'd married, the man who'd held her hand during Emma's birth and promised to love her through everything. This was a stranger wearing her husband's face. What do we do now? We expose everything, Rebecca said firmly. The hidden assets, the affair, the timeline of his deception. We show the court exactly what kind of man we're dealing with. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Robert. I'm picking up some of my things from the house tonight. Please don't make a scene in front of the staff. She showed the message to Rebecca, who frowned. He can't just show up at the house anymore. The divorce filing establishes your right to exclusive occupancy during proceedings. Should I call the police if he comes? You should call me first. But Sarah, I want you to consider something else. He's trying to intimidate you by showing up unannounced. Don't let him. That evening, as snow continued to fall outside, Sarah heard Robert's Mercedes crunching up the driveway. She was ready for him, sitting in the living room with Emma beside her and Rebecca on speed dial. He let himself in with his key, stamping snow off his expensive shoes and hanging his coat in the front closet as if nothing had changed. But when he walked into the living room and saw her waiting, something flickered across his face. Sarah, he said carefully, you look well. I'm 8 months pregnant with your child. Robert, how did you expect me to look? He settled into the chair across from her, the same spot where he'd received the news of her pregnancy months ago. I think we both know this situation is more complicated than it appears. Sarah felt Emma tense beside her, but she kept her own voice level. What situation would that be? This pregnancy, the timing, are difficulties. Robert's voice carried the same careful tone he used in board meetings when delivering bad news to shareholders. I think it's best for everyone if we get some clarity about the biological facts. Biological facts. Sarah repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air between them. You want paternity testing for the child we conceived together in our marriage bed. Sarah, be reasonable. We haven't been intimate regularly in months. You know that. And when this all started, you admitted the pregnancy was unexpected. Because I thought I was too old to get pregnant. Sarah's composure finally cracked. Not because I'd been sleeping around behind your back. I'm not saying you were sleeping around, Robert said, but his tone suggested exactly that. I'm saying that emotions are running high, and we should deal in facts rather than assumptions. Emma stood up suddenly, her hands clenched into fists. Dad, do you hear yourself? You're calling Mom a liar about her own pregnancy, your own child. Emma, this is between your mother and me. No, Emma said fiercely. This is about our family, the family you're destroying because you can't handle getting older like a decent human being. Robert's mask slipped for a moment, showing something ugly underneath. You don't understand the complexities of adult relationships. Emma, your mother and I grew apart years ago. This baby is just her attempt to keep me trapped in a marriage that stopped working long before Victoria came along. The words hung in the room like poison gas. Sarah felt her daughter's pain as acutely as her own, and something inside her finally snapped. Get out, she said quietly. Sarah, get out of my house. Her voice was stronger now, carrying the authority of a woman who'd finally seen her husband clearly. Pack whatever you came for and leave. And Robert, the next time you want to insult me or question my integrity, do it through your lawyers. I'm done pretending you're the man I married. For a moment, she thought he might argue. but something in her expression must have warned him off because he simply nodded and walked toward the stairs. 20 minutes later, he was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne and the echo of words that could never be taken back. "Mom," Emma said softly, "are you okay?" Sarah looked around the living room where she'd celebrated Christmas mornings and birthday parties, where she'd read bedtime stories and helped with homework and built a life she'd thought would last forever. "You know what?" she said finally. "I think I am. For the first time in months." That wasn't a lie. January wind howled around the corners of the Manhattan courthouse as Sarah climbed the steps. One hand pressed to her lower back where the weight of her full-term pregnancy had settled like a constant ache. At 38 weeks, she was huge, uncomfortable, and absolutely determined to see this through. "You should be home," Rebecca muttered, steadying Sarah's elbow as they navigated the icy steps. "You should be in bed, waiting for labor to start, not fighting your ex-husband in court." "My ex-husband should have thought about that before he decided to question the paternity of his own child," Sarah retorted, her breath puffing out in the frigid air. "Besides, our daughter deserves to see her mom fighting for her right from the get-go." Emma walked on Sarah's other side, lugging a briefcase overflowing with documents and sporting the fierce look she'd inherited from both of us. "The photographer from page 6 is back," she warned. "They're practically drooling for another dramatic moment to sensationalize." Sarah shot a glance at the pack of reporters and photographers camped out by the courthouse entrance. 6 grueling weeks of legal wrangling had morphed her divorce into a full-blown media circus, with daily articles dissecting every court filing and analyzing her every public move. "Let them gawk," Sarah declared. "I'm done hiding." Inside the courthouse, Robert's legal squad had assembled like a small army. Sarah counted no less than 6 lawyers in power suits, plus what looked like private investigators and PR spin doctors. Her own team consisted of Rebecca, 2 fresh-faced junior associates, and Emma, ever present with her camera. "David versus Goliath," Rebecca murmured. "Just the way I like it." Robert himself sat at the far table, looking older than his 52 years. The sheer stress of the divorce and the criminal charges leveled against Victoria had clearly taken a toll. His company's stock price had tanked 12% since the scandal exploded, and 2 board members had quietly tendered their resignations. Sarah lowered herself carefully into her seat, arranging her maternity dress to give her belly some breathing room. Almost instantly, she felt her daughter shift restlessly, as if sensing the tension simmering in the room. "Not yet, little one," she whispered. "Let mommy finish this thing first." Judge Patricia Williams entered, her face etched with an expression that telegraphed she'd already heard more about this case than she could stomach in a lifetime. She was a woman in her 60s with steely gray hair and the no-nonsense vibe of someone who'd spent decades watching wealthy men try to game the legal system. "I'm going to lay down some ground rules before we even begin," Judge Williams announced, settling in behind the bench. "This court has zero tolerance for media stunts or character assassination. We're here to dissolve a marriage and figure out appropriate support for the minor children involved. Nothing more, nothing less." Robert's lead attorney, a sharp-faced guy named Harrison Beck, was on his feet in a heartbeat. "Your Honor, we appreciate the court's position, but there are some pretty fundamental questions about the legitimacy of the claims being made." "Mr. Beck," the judge interrupted, "are you alluding to the paternity issue your client has so conveniently raised?" "Yes, Your Honor. Given the circumstances surrounding the marriage and the timing of this pregnancy, my client has some very reasonable concerns." "Mr. Beck," Judge Williams' voice could have shattered glass, "I've scrutinized the timeline of this pregnancy, the medical records, and the couple's travel itinerary. Unless Mr. Mitchell is claiming immaculate conception, the math is crystal clear. This motion is denied, and I don't want to hear another peep about paternity." Sarah felt a surge of vindication so fierce she had to grip the table to keep herself from cheering. Beside her, Rebecca scribbled a quick note. "Round 1 to us." Beck took another shot. "Your Honor, there are also serious questions about the plaintiff's motivations in filing for divorce. The timing suggests, Judge Williams interjected dryly, that Mrs. Mitchell filed for divorce after being assaulted by her husband's mistress in a public place. Unless you're arguing that assault is grounds for reconciliation, I suggest we move along to the financial matters. Rebecca rose gracefully. Your Honor, we've prepared a comprehensive breakdown of the marital assets, including some rather disturbing discoveries about hidden wealth. For the next 2 hours, Rebecca laid out their case with meticulous precision, presenting bank records that revealed systematic asset transfers, travel receipts that proved Robert's affair had been going on for well over a year, and business expenses that were clearly funding his relationship with Victoria. But the most damning evidence came from Emma's meticulous documentation. Video clips of Robert gushing about the baby, expressing excitement about becoming a father again, and making plans for their daughter's future. The stark contrast between his public pronouncements and his current legal stance was devastating. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Williams said during a brief recess, I'm curious about something. In this video from October, you're very clearly discussing nursery furniture for your baby. What changed between October and December that made you question paternity? Robert's jaw visibly tightened. Your Honor, I was just trying to be supportive during a difficult time. Or, the judge countered. Were you already plotting your exit strategy and needed a way to duck out of child support obligations? Beck jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. The court is making assumptions. Mr. Beck, I'm making observations based on the evidence. Your client spent $15 million squirreling away assets while simultaneously celebrating his wife's pregnancy publicly. That suggests calculated planning, not spontaneous doubt. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah watched her husband's carefully crafted narrative crumble piece by piece. The forensic accountant testified about offshore shell corporations. The private investigator presented rock-solid evidence of Robert's year-long affair. Even several of Robert's own business associates testified about Victoria's constant presence at company events. But the absolute knockout punch came when Rebecca played audio from Sarah's recorded phone calls with Robert, legally obtained under New York's one-party consent law. Robert's voice boomed through the courtroom. She means absolutely nothing to me, Sarah. You and the baby are my family. Then, just 3 days later, this pregnancy is just her pathetic attempt to keep me trapped in a marriage that died years ago. The sheer contradiction was so blatant, so transparently manipulative, that even Beck seemed to realize the case was a lost cause. During the final recess, Sarah struggled to her feet, her back screaming and her daughter kicking insistently against her ribs. As she made her way to the restroom, she passed Robert in the hallway. For one endless moment, they locked eyes. The man she'd loved for 22 years and the woman she'd been forced to become through fighting him. Sarah, he said quietly, this doesn't have to end like this. We could still work something out. Sarah looked at him with something bordering on pity. Even now, staring down the barrel of complete defeat, he was still trying to negotiate, to find some angle that would salvage his money or his precious ego. Robert, she said gently, this ended the moment you stood by and let another woman shove me to the ground while I was carrying your child. Everything since then has just been paperwork. When court reconvened for Judge Williams' ruling, Sarah was beyond ready. Having reviewed all the evidence and testimony, the judge began. This court finds that Mr. Mitchell has systematically concealed marital assets, engaged in an extramarital affair using marital funds, and attempted to manipulate these proceedings through false claims about paternity. Sarah felt her daughter deliver a particularly forceful kick, as if celebrating the victory. The court hereby orders the following. All hidden assets will be returned to the marital estate and divided equally. Mr. Mitchell will pay child support of $15,000 per month until the child reaches majority. Mrs. Mitchell will retain ownership of the marital home and receive spousal support of $25,000 per month for 10 years. Rebecca was scribbling like a madwoman, but Sarah barely registered the specific numbers. What truly mattered was the overarching truth she'd fought tooth and nail for and finally won. Her daughter would grow up knowing that her mother had refused to be quietly discarded. Furthermore, Judge Williams continued, given Mr. Mitchell's blatant attempts to hide assets and manipulate these proceedings, he will be held responsible for all legal fees incurred by both parties. As the gavel slammed down, Sarah felt something inside her chest unclench for the first time in what felt like forever. The woman who'd been knocked to the ground in a coffee shop had stood tall, fought back with every ounce of her being, and emerged victorious. But even as victory settled around her like a warm, comforting blanket, Sarah felt the unmistakable tightening of a contraction grip her belly. Their daughter, it seemed, was ready to make her grand entrance into the world. The labor pains started in the courthouse elevator and intensified with each floor they descended. By the time Sarah reached the lobby, she was clinging to Emma's arm and breathing through contractions that felt like her entire body was being rearranged from the inside out. "Mom," Emma said urgently. "We need to get you to a hospital like yesterday." "Not yet," Sarah gasped, pausing beside a marble pillar as another wave of pain crashed over her. "Rebecca needs to finalize the paperwork. Make sure the settlement is properly filed." "Sarah, honey," Rebecca said, appearing at her elbow with a stack of documents. "The paperwork can wait. You're about to have a baby." Through the courthouse windows, Sarah could see the pack of reporters and photographers who'd been documenting her legal battle for weeks. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her daughter was choosing to arrive on the very day her mother had finally secured their future. "Mrs. Mitchell," a young court clerk approached nervously. "Judge Williams asked me to tell you that she's expediting the final orders. Everything will be officially filed within the hour." Sarah nodded her thanks, then doubled over as another contraction hit. When the pain subsided, she looked up to find Robert standing nearby, his face pale and etched with uncertainty. "Sarah," he said hesitantly, "do you need me to drive you to the hospital?" The question was so absurd that Sarah almost laughed out loud. "I think you've done enough, don't you?" Emma was already hailing a cab while Rebecca gathered their legal documents. As they helped Sarah toward the door, she heard Robert call her name again. "What?" she said, turning back despite Emma's protests. He seemed to struggle with the words. Will you let me know when she's born?" Sarah studied his face, searching for some flicker of the man she'd once loved. What she saw instead was a stranger who'd spent months trying to obliterate her, and was now asking for the privilege of meeting their daughter. "I'll think about it," she said finally, which was probably more kindness than he deserved. The ride to Mount Sinai Hospital was a blur of traffic and increasingly intense contractions. Emma held one hand while Rebecca handled the logistics, calling doctors and alerting the hospital that they were on their way. "This is really happening," Sarah gasped between contractions. "She's really coming at the most perfect time," Emma said firmly. "She waited for you to win, Mom. She wanted to be born into freedom." Dr. Jennifer Walsh was waiting when they arrived, her familiar face a welcome sight in the chaos of the emergency room. "Well, Sarah," she said with a warm smile, "I see your daughter has impeccable timing. Let's get you upstairs and see how far along you are." The next 12 hours unfolded in the surreal, suspended reality of labor. Sarah had somehow forgotten how utterly consuming it was, how completely it demanded every last ounce of strength and focus. But this time felt different from Emma's birth 24 years ago. This time, she wasn't anxiously waiting for a husband to rush in from some business meeting. This time, her support system felt complete and whole without him. Emma documented every moment with her camera, creating what she called the first chapter of our new story. Rebecca handled the nonstop barrage of legal calls and media requests from the hospital lobby. And Sarah labored, knowing that each contraction brought her closer to holding the daughter she'd fought so fiercely to protect. At 3:47 a.m. on January 15th, Grace Elizabeth Mitchell made her entrance into the world with a lusty cry that announced her absolute displeasure at being evicted from her warm, quiet home. "She's perfect," Dr. Walsh declared, gently placing the baby on Sarah's chest. "Absolutely perfect, and absolutely beautiful." Sarah looked down at her daughter's wrinkled red face and felt something shift profoundly in her understanding of everything. This tiny person had been worth every single moment of the past 6 months. Every legal battle, every agonizing moment of doubt and fear. "Hello, Grace," she whispered. "I'm your mama, and I have so much to tell you." Emma was openly weeping as she filmed the first precious moments of her sister's life. "Mom," She looks exactly like you did in the old baby pictures. Grace had Sarah's big brown eyes and what looked like it might turn out to be Robert's dark hair. But her expression, even in those very first moments, seemed uniquely her own. Alert, determined, already sizing up her brand new world. "She's a fighter," Sarah said, gently stroking Grace's soft cheek. "She's going to need to be." Over the next few days, visitors streamed through Sarah's hospital room. Emma's filmmaker friends brought flowers and organic baby clothes. Rebecca arrived with champagne she couldn't drink until after she was done breastfeeding, along with the official legal documents that made their victory official. Even Judge Williams sent a congratulatory note with a gift certificate for children's books. But the most meaningful visitor of all was Eleanor Vanderburg, the grande dame of society who'd quietly supported Sarah throughout the entire grueling divorce proceedings. "My dear," Eleanor said, settling into the bedside chair with the effortless grace of someone who'd been navigating the treacherous waters of high society politics for 60 years. "You've given all of us something incredibly precious." "Oh," Sarah asked, gently adjusting Grace in her arms. "And what's that?" "Permission to stop accepting unacceptable behavior from powerful men," Eleanor said simply. "Half the women in our circle are married to men who believe their wealth somehow gives them the right to simply discard their wives the moment they become inconvenient. You've shown them there's a different way." Sarah looked down at Grace, who was sleeping soundly despite the ongoing conversation. "I just wanted to protect her, to make absolutely sure she grows up knowing that women never have to tolerate narcissistic abuse or financial manipulation. And that lesson will ripple out far beyond the walls of this room," Eleanor said. "You've started something, Sarah. Women supporting other women, refusing to be victims, fighting for financial independence after 50. It's a movement whether you intended it to be or not." That evening, as visiting hours drew to a close and the hospital settled into its quiet nighttime rhythm, Sarah found herself completely alone with Grace for the very first time. She walked slowly around the room, her daughter warm and solid in her arms, and marveled at how completely her life had been transformed. Just 6 months ago, she'd been a traditional wife, focused on managing a household and supporting her husband's career. Now, she was a single mother with a very substantial divorce settlement, a daughter who documented social justice, and a story that was apparently inspiring other women to find the courage to fight for themselves. "Your daddy wanted to meet you," she told Grace quietly, "but I'm not sure he's earned that right just yet. He'll have to prove he can put your needs first, and that's not something he's demonstrated much skill at lately." Grace stirred in her arms, making the soft, snuffling sounds that newborns make while they're dreaming. "But you know what, little one? We don't need him to be happy. We don't need anyone else to be complete. We have each other and we have Emma, and we have more financial independence than most women even dream of having." Outside the hospital window, the lights of New York City glittered in the January night. Somewhere out there, Robert was probably holed up in his hotel room, desperately trying to figure out how to rebuild a life and a reputation that had been shattered by his own choices. Victoria was grappling with criminal charges and the utter collapse of her carefully orchestrated social climbing ambitions. But here, in this quiet hospital room, Sarah was embarking on something entirely new. Not the life she'd planned, perhaps, but maybe the life she'd been meant to live all along. "Welcome to the world, Grace Elizabeth Mitchell," she whispered. "Let me tell you all about your mama and all the amazing things we're going to do together." 6 months after Grace's birth, Sarah stood in the empty shell of what would soon become Second Chance's cafe, surveying the construction chaos with the satisfied smile of a woman building something that was entirely her own. Sawdust coated every surface, exposed pipes snaked across the ceiling, and the sharp smell of fresh paint mingled with the rich aroma of coffee brewing from the state-of-the-art espresso machine she'd insisted on installing first. "Mom, this is going to be absolutely incredible," Emma said, stepping carefully around the construction equipment while filming the entire renovation process. Her documentary about midlife transformation had naturally evolved to include Sarah's story, and she was documenting every single step of the cafe's creation. Sarah gently adjusted Grace in her arms, marveling as always at how perfectly her daughter fit against her hip. At 6 months old, Grace was a serious baby, studying everything with dark, intelligent eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She seemed particularly captivated by the cacophony of construction noise and the constant parade of workers who stopped to admire her. "The location is absolutely perfect," Rebecca said, joining them after her thorough inspection of the kitchen area. She'd driven down from Boston for the cafe's construction milestone. The day the custom-made furniture was finally delivered. Right smack in the heart of Manhattan's business district, just a short walk from 3 major law firms specializing in family law. "I didn't pick it because of the divorce attorneys," Sarah laughed, though she certainly appreciated the irony. "I chose it because it's where women come to think, to work, to make decisions that will change the entire trajectory of their lives." The cafe occupied the ground floor of a beautifully renovated brownstone just off Madison Avenue, conveniently close enough to the financial district to attract plenty of businesswomen, but far enough away from Robert's office building to avoid any potentially awkward encounters. Sarah had purchased the space with a portion of her divorce settlement, transforming it from a generic retail space into something that felt like a unique combination of living room, library, and sanctuary. "Tell me about the business model again," Emma said, her camera steadily rolling as Sarah walked slowly through the space. "Coffee and conversation," Sarah said simply, "but also workshops on financial independence, legal clinics for women contemplating divorce, support groups for single mothers, a place where women can find practical help and support along with their lattes." The front door chimed, and Jack Patterson entered, carrying a set of blueprints and wearing his signature expression of amused satisfaction. The private investigator who'd played a key role in building Sarah's airtight divorce case had become an unexpected friend and was now helping her navigate the often bewildering complexities of small business ownership. "The security system is officially installed," he announced, "and I've got some reliable contacts at the local precinct who will keep a watchful eye on the place. Word's been getting around about what you're doing here, and let's just say that not everyone is thrilled about it." Sarah felt a familiar flutter of worry in her stomach. The intense media attention surrounding her divorce had gradually faded, but she still received occasional hostile messages from people who thought she'd been far too greedy or vindictive. Some of Robert's business associates had also made it abundantly clear that they considered her a traitor to their social circle. "What kind of disapproval are we talking about here?" Rebecca asked, her lawyer instincts immediately kicking into high gear. "Nothing actionable, don't worry," Jack assured her. "Just some grumbling from certain circles about women getting ideas above their station. The usual nonsense from men who think that successful women pose some kind of threat to the natural order." Grace chose that precise moment to let out an indignant wail, as if she completely understood the conversation and wanted to voice her very strong opinion about men who felt threatened by women's success. "That's absolutely right, sweetheart," Sarah said, gently bouncing her daughter in her arms. "Mama's got ideas way above her station, and that's exactly where they belong." The custom-made furniture began to arrive that afternoon. Sturdy wooden tables that could easily accommodate laptops and legal documents, comfortable chairs strategically arranged in intimate conversation clusters, and built-in bookshelves that would soon be filled with everything from financial planning guides to empowering memoirs by women who'd successfully reinvented their lives after the age of 50. But the true centerpiece of the cafe was the stunning collection of chairs that Sarah had specially commissioned from a talented local craftsman. Each one was unique, meticulously designed to be both beautiful and absolutely unshakable. No one would ever have a chair kicked out from under them in Sarah's space ever again. "Mrs. Mitchell?" A young woman appeared nervously in the doorway, her expression a mix of trepidation and determination. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I heard about your cafe. My name is Jessica Chen, and I was wondering." "Come on in," Sarah said warmly, immediately recognizing the look in the woman's eyes. She'd seen that same expression reflected in mirrors for months during her own divorce proceedings. The unmistakable look of someone summoning the courage to fundamentally change her life. "I read about your case," Jessica said, glancing around the bustling construction zone. "About how you fought back when your husband tried to just discard you. I'm in a pretty similar situation. My husband is 15 years older than me, incredibly successful, and he's been having an affair with someone from his office." Sarah gently handed Grace to Emma and gave Jessica her undivided attention. "How can I help? I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight like you did," Jessica confessed. I've been a stay-at-home mother for the past 8 years. I don't have a career of my own, I don't have my own money. I'm just terrified that if I challenge him, I'll lose absolutely everything. You're already losing everything, Sarah said gently but firmly. The only question is whether you're going to simply let it happen to you, or if you're going to seize control of the process. For the next hour, Sarah, Rebecca, and Jessica sat together on overturned construction crates and talked through potential options, available resources, and realistic expectations for what a divorce might actually look like. By the time Jessica finally left, she had Rebecca's business card clutched tightly in her hand, along with a comprehensive list of crucial financial documents to gather, and something she'd been desperately missing for months. Hope. That's what this place is really all about, Sarah told Emma as they watched Jessica walk away with noticeably more confidence than she'd arrived with. Not just the coffee or the workshops or any of that. It's about women helping other women believe that they are absolutely worth fighting for. As evening approached and the construction workers finished up for the day, Sarah found herself alone in the cafe with Grace, who was quietly dozing in her portable carrier. The space was still and peaceful, broken only by the distant sounds of Manhattan traffic and the soft hum of the brand-new espresso machine. She thought back to the woman she'd been just 1 year ago, excitedly planning nursery colors and believing that her biggest challenge in life would be managing a pregnancy at the relatively advanced age of 48. That woman had been comfortable but ultimately powerless, secure but sadly invisible, loved but never truly respected. The woman standing in this half-finished cafe was something entirely different. She was a business owner, a single mother by choice, a resounding divorce settlement success story, and, apparently, a genuine inspiration to other women who were fighting their own difficult battles. Her phone buzzed softly with a text message from an unknown number. Saw the article about your cafe in the Times. Just wanted to let you know that you helped me finally leave my narcissistic husband last month. Thank you for showing me that it was possible. A grateful reader. Similar messages were now arriving daily from women all across the country who'd read about her highly publicized case and decided to take a stand and fight for their own financial independence and their long-neglected self-respect. Emma was carefully collecting all of them for her documentary, creating what she lovingly called a digital sisterhood of women supporting women. Grace stirred gently in her carrier, opening her dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every single detail of their brand-new venture. So, what do you think, little one? Sarah asked softly. Are we going to change the world, one coffee conversation at a time? Grace's only response was a wide, beaming smile that could have melted even the most hardened, cynical heart. I'll definitely take that as a yes, Sarah said, gently lifting her daughter into her arms. Your mama's got some big plans for us, Grace Elizabeth. Big plans, and finally the financial independence to actually make them happen. Outside, the city of Manhattan glittered with the enticing promise of another brand new day, another precious opportunity for women to support each other, to fight fiercely for what they deserved, and to flatly refuse to accept any more unacceptable treatment from the powerful men in their lives. Sarah Mitchell had finally discovered her true calling in life, and it was every bit as revolutionary as Emma had so confidently predicted. 1 year later, Sarah stood proudly behind the counter of Second Chance's cafe, expertly pulling shots of espresso while Grace happily played nearby in her portable playpen, babbling cheerfully at the cafe's regular customers, who'd truly become like extended family. The morning rush was now in full swing, savvy businesswomen grabbing their caffeine fix before heading to important court appearances, busy mothers meeting for essential support group sessions, and wise, older women. The cafe buzzed with the energy of women attending Rebecca's weekly financial independence workshops for those over 50. The cafe had not only met but far exceeded every expectation Sarah had dared to harbor. It was featured in magazines as Manhattan's most empowering coffee shop, a place of pilgrimage for women seeking inspiration and practical guidance through life's transitions. But more importantly, to Sarah, it had blossomed into precisely what she had envisioned. A sanctuary where women could discover their inner strength and boldly claim their inherent worth. Sarah, a familiar voice cut through her focus, pulling her gaze away from the espresso machine. Victoria Lawson stood hesitantly in the doorway, bearing little resemblance to the impeccably dressed predator who had so viciously attacked Sarah's life 2 years prior. The designer clothes that had been her trademark were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a plain sweater. Her once perfectly coiffed hair was pulled back in a humble ponytail, and her face now displayed a raw vulnerability, the kind that comes from watching your meticulously constructed life crumble into dust. The cafe fell into an unnerving silence. Every regular customer knew the story. They all knew that this was the woman who had assaulted their beloved owner, Sarah. Sarah felt the protective energy of her community rise around her like an invisible shield. "What do you want, Victoria?" Sarah asked calmly, wiping her hands on her apron, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "To apologize," Victoria said, her voice barely audible, a mere whisper in the suddenly still air, "and to ask if you have any openings for someone who needs a second chance." Sarah studied the younger woman's face intently, searching for any lingering signs of manipulation or calculation, the hallmarks of the Victoria she remembered. But what she saw instead was a genuine remorse, etched deeply into her features, and the kind of desperation that only comes from the soul-crushing realization that the carefully planned life you've built was, in reality, precariously balanced on a foundation of quicksand. "Grace, sweetie, go play with Emma in the back office," Sarah said gently, lifting her daughter from the playpen. At 18 months old, Grace was already walking with unwavering confidence and had somehow developed her mother's uncanny ability to sense tension in a room. As if on cue, Emma appeared immediately, her timing impeccable, as if she had been waiting for this very moment. Her documentary about women's midlife transformations had premiered to rave reviews at Sundance and was now being distributed nationwide, with Sarah's story serving as its powerful centerpiece. "Victoria," Emma said coolly, taking Grace's small hand in hers, "I didn't expect to see you here. I know you probably think I don't deserve to be here," Victoria said, addressing both women, her voice laced with a hint of self-deprecation. "And you're probably right, but I've lost everything, and I need to start over. I need to learn how to be someone other than the person I was." Sarah's gaze swept across her cafe, taking in the faces of the women who had found solace, strength, and a sense of belonging within these walls. Some were divorce survivors, picking up the shattered pieces of their lives, just as she had. Others were widows, suddenly burdened with the daunting task of managing finances for the very first time. Still others were young mothers, desperately trying to navigate the treacherous waters of balancing career ambitions with the overwhelming responsibilities of family. Yet, despite their diverse backgrounds and experiences, they all shared one thing in common. They all needed a second chance. "What happened to you?" Sarah asked finally, the question hanging heavy in the air. Victoria's carefully constructed composure cracked ever so slightly. "The assault charges cost me my job and my reputation. My father disowned me when the family business lost clients because of the scandal. And Robert discarded me the moment I became a liability instead of an asset." Sarah felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, a feeling she hadn't expected to experience. She knew exactly what it felt like to be discarded by Robert Mitchell, tossed aside like yesterday's news the moment you stopped serving his insatiable purposes. "I spent the last year in therapy," Victoria continued, her voice wavering slightly, "trying to understand how I became someone who would attack a pregnant woman out of jealousy and entitlement. I learned some things about myself that weren't pleasant, such as..." Rebecca's voice, sharp and protective, cut through the tense atmosphere. She had arrived for their weekly business meeting and was clearly prepared to shield Sarah from any potential manipulation attempt. "Such as the fact that I was raised to believe my worth came from the man I could attract and keep," Victoria said, meeting Rebecca's hostile gaze steadily, refusing to back down. "I was taught that other women were competition, not potential allies. I was programmed to see someone like Sarah as an obstacle to overcome rather than a person deserving of respect." Grace toddled back from the office, drawn by the palpable tension she could feel, even if she couldn't fully comprehend it. She walked directly to Victoria and offered her a colorful wooden block, her standard, go-to gesture of friendship and reconciliation. Victoria knelt down to Grace's level, and Sarah saw tears welling up in the younger woman's eyes. "Hello, beautiful girl," Victoria whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm the bad lady who hurt your mama. I'm very, very sorry about that." Grace tilted her head, studying Victoria with the serious, unwavering expression she'd inherited from both of her parents, an expression that belied her young age. Then, she reached out and patted Victoria's cheek gently, the same tender gesture she often used when Sarah was feeling sad or overwhelmed. "Even my daughter has more emotional intelligence than you showed 2 years ago," Sarah said quietly, her voice laced with a hint of lingering bitterness. "I know," Victoria said, standing slowly, her shoulders slumped with remorse. "I know I hurt you terribly, and I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. But Sarah, this place represents everything I never understood about women supporting each other. I want to learn that. I want to be better." Sarah looked intently at this woman who had once been her husband's mistress, who had physically assaulted her in public, who had relentlessly tried to destroy her reputation and steal her entire life. The old Sarah might have harbored a deep-seated hatred, might have even secretly enjoyed witnessing Victoria's downfall, but the woman she'd become through the arduous process of fighting for her own worth and reclaiming her life understood something profoundly different. Hurt people, and healed people help heal people. "We have an opening for a barista," Sarah said finally, breaking the heavy silence. "Minimum wage, no benefits until after 90 days, and you'd have to complete our employee training program on supporting women in crisis." Victoria's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope flickering within them. "You'd really give me a chance?" "I'd give you a chance to earn a chance," Sarah corrected, her voice firm but not unkind. "This community would have to accept you, and that might take time. You'd have to prove that you understand what this place represents." "I understand," Victoria said quickly, her eagerness palpable. "Or, I want to understand. I want to learn how to be someone worth knowing." Emma, who had been discreetly filming from the back of the cafe, now approached, her camera lowered. "This is going to make an incredible epilogue for the documentary," she said thoughtfully, a spark of creative inspiration in her eyes. "The full circle of forgiveness and growth." "It's not forgiveness yet," Sarah said firmly, nipping that idea in the bud. "It's an opportunity. Forgiveness has to be earned through consistent actions over time." Over the following weeks, Victoria proved herself willing to do whatever was asked of her. No task too menial, no request too demanding. She diligently cleaned tables, tirelessly restocked supplies, learned to make coffee that even the most discerning palates would appreciate, and gradually began participating in the conversations that flowed naturally within the cafe's supportive environment. Sarah watched her carefully, her eyes constantly searching for any telltale signs of the old manipulative behavior, the subtle hints of the woman Victoria used to be. But what she saw instead was a woman genuinely trying to rebuild herself from the ground up, brick by brick, learning to measure her worth by her contributions rather than her conquests, her actions rather than her appearances. The breakthrough came during a particularly difficult support group session. A young woman named Maria was crying, her voice choked with emotion, as she described her husband's insidious financial abuse, his systematic destruction of her self-esteem, his veiled threats about what would happen if she ever dared to leave him. "I feel so stupid," Maria sobbed, her body racked with shame. "How did I let myself become so powerless? How did I not see what he was doing?" Victoria, who had been quietly serving coffee, suddenly spoke up, her voice soft but filled with a newfound conviction. "Because women are taught to be grateful for male attention, even when that attention comes with a price," she said gently. "We're taught to measure our worth by our ability to keep a man happy, even when making him happy requires us to make ourselves smaller, to dim our own light." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Victoria, who seemed surprised by her own words. This was the first time she had voluntarily contributed to a support group discussion, the first time she had dared to share her own insights and experiences. "I spent 5 years trying to steal another woman's husband," Victoria continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, her gaze unwavering. "I told myself I was fighting for love, but really, I was fighting for the security I thought came from being chosen by a powerful man. I never stopped to consider that real security comes from choosing yourself. Maria looked up through her tear-filled eyes, her gaze searching. But how do you learn to choose yourself when you've spent your whole life choosing everyone else? You start by surrounding yourself with women who've already learned that lesson, Victoria said, glancing around the room, her eyes meeting those of the other women. You listen to their stories. You watch how they've rebuilt their lives. And you practice making decisions based on what serves your growth rather than what serves someone else's ego. Sarah felt something shift within her chest. A subtle but significant change. Not quite forgiveness, not yet, but the undeniable beginning of it. Victoria was finally learning the same hard-won lessons that Sarah had fought so fiercely to master. That a woman's worth wasn't dependent on male approval, that financial independence was a form of self-respect, and that supporting other women was the most revolutionary act a woman could perform. As the support group ended and the women began filtering out into the bustling Manhattan evening, Victoria approached Sarah's counter, her expression sincere. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice filled with gratitude. "For giving me a chance to become someone better." Sarah looked at this woman who had once tried to destroy her life and now spent her days helping other women build theirs. A testament to the transformative power of second chances and unwavering support. "You're welcome," she said, her voice warm. "But Victoria, remember, becoming someone better is a choice you have to make every single day." "I know," Victoria said, her eyes shining with newfound determination. "And I choose it. Every day I choose it." Later that evening, after the cafe had closed its doors and Grace was asleep in her stroller, Sarah stood in the doorway, gazing out at the vibrant lights of Madison Avenue. 2 years ago, she had been knocked down on a coffee shop floor, humiliated and betrayed, her life seemingly in ruins. Tonight, she was the proud owner of a thriving business, the loving mother of a happy toddler, and the inspiration for a growing movement of women supporting women across the country. Emma joined her in the doorway, her camera in hand as always, ready to capture the next chapter of this incredible story. "Mom, do you ever miss the old life, the security of being married to a millionaire ex-husband?" Sarah considered the question seriously, weighing the pros and cons, the gains and the losses. She thought about the sprawling mansion in Westchester, about never having to worry about bills or business decisions or the relentless challenges of single parenting. She thought about the woman she had been then, when her biggest concerns were choosing paint colors and managing household staff, a life of comfortable complacency. "You know what I miss?" Sarah said finally, her voice laced with a hint of nostalgia. "I miss believing that love was permanent and that promises meant something. But I don't miss being powerless. I don't miss having my worth determined by someone else's choices." Grace stirred in her stroller, making the soft, contented sounds that meant she was dreaming sweet dreams. Sarah smoothed her daughter's dark hair, marveling at how peaceful she looked, untouched by the trials and tribulations of the adult world. "This little girl will grow up knowing something I had to learn the hard way," Sarah continued, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "She'll know that her worth isn't dependent on any man's approval. She'll know that financial independence isn't selfish, it's survival. And she'll know that women supporting women isn't just nice, it's necessary." Emma was crying quietly behind her camera, her emotions raw and unfiltered. "Mom, you've built something incredible here. Not just the cafe, but this whole community of women learning to value themselves." "We built it," Sarah corrected gently, emphasizing the collaborative nature of their achievement. "All of us together, every woman who shared her story, every woman who offered support to another, every woman who chose to fight for herself instead of accepting unacceptable treatment." As they prepared to leave, Sarah took one last, lingering look around her cafe, a space that had become so much more than just a business. She took in the custom chairs that could never be kicked out from under anyone, a symbol of unwavering support and stability. She saw the bookshelves overflowing with resources for women in transition, a beacon of knowledge and empowerment. She gazed upon the bulletin board covered with success stories from women who had found their strength within these walls, a testament to the transformative power of community. Tomorrow would undoubtedly bring new challenges, new women seeking support, new opportunities to prove that midlife transformation was not only possible but powerfully liberating. Victoria would continue learning how to rebuild herself with integrity instead of manipulation, her journey far from over. Emma would finish her documentary and eagerly start planning her next project, exploring more untold stories of women that desperately needed to be heard. And Sarah would continue serving coffee and hope in equal measure, proving every single day that being knocked down was just the beginning of learning how to stand up stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever before. "Come on, Grace," she whispered to her sleeping daughter, her voice filled with love and affection. "Let's go home. Tomorrow we get to change the world again, one conversation at a time." The chair that had once been so violently kicked out from under her, the symbol of her lowest moment, had ultimately become the foundation for something unshakable, a testament to her unwavering strength and resilience. And Sarah Mitchell, single mother and cafe owner, had learned that sometimes the best revenge wasn't revenge at all, but rather living so well, with such unwavering purpose and joy, that your former oppressor humbly asked for a job, a chance to be a part of the incredible world you had created. As they walked out into the crisp Manhattan night, Grace safe and sound in her stroller and Emma diligently documenting their journey, Sarah smiled at the perfect symmetry of it all. She had started this story as a victim of narcissistic abuse and financial manipulation, her life seemingly shattered beyond repair. And she was ending it as a woman who empowered other women to discover their own inner strength and reclaim their lives, a powerful force of change in a world that desperately needed more of it. And that, she thought, was exactly the kind of transformation the world needed more of, one woman at a time.